Okay, let's unpack this. For decades, the UFO phenomena, or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, as the government now insists we call them, it's existed as this massive, frustrating constellation of isolated dots.
Right.
We've got blurry photos, we have these bizarre witness accounts, military radar data, high-level whistleblowers.
You've got physical evidence over here, psychological evidence over there, and they often seem to completely contradict each other.
And try to connect them all into a single, cohesive story.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just drawing a picture in the dark.
And that exact feeling of frustration, that cognitive dissonance, is precisely where James Vereiser starts his paper, Joining the Dots, what the UFO phenomenon really reveals. He uses that children's puzzle imagery, the numbered dots.
It's a great metaphor.
It is. He says if you stand too close to the page, I mean literally standing between the dots, focusing only on one sighting, or one piece of radar, or one ancient text.
You see nothing.
Nothing but chaos and contradiction. He says you have to step back. You need perspective to see the full, coherent image that actually connects all these different data points.
And this is the crucial hook that Vereiser gives us right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's the part that tells you this is not going to be some gentle technological assessment. He says that when you finally gain enough perspective and you connect those numbered dots in their proper sequence, what's revealed isn't a cute, friendly puppy.
Or a benevolent space brother here to give us clean energy.
No. You are revealed, in his words, a menacing monster staring back.
And the paper's premise is just so radical because it demands this grand synthesis. It forces you to look at data points that academia and science, they typically keep them completely segregated.
Things that should never be in the same room together.
Exactly. Modern military encounters, high-level intelligence reports, ancient religious texts, and these harrowing abduction accounts. And he tries to synthesize them into a single, comprehensive framework.
And the argument is that only by viewing the phenomenon through this kind of historical, spiritual, and physical lens can we understand its true nature.
And its intent.
Absolutely. So our deep dive mission today is to follow Vereiser's numbered dots. We're going to follow them precisely. We're analyzing his synthesis, his arguments, and we're going to do it impartially.
Right. We're just reporting on how he connects the military dots to the mythological dots.
Even when the claims become deeply spiritual or, politically cynical or even just genuinely disturbing, we're here to understand the picture that he claims emerges from all this evidence.
It's a huge task. I mean, we have to bridge gaps that normal scientific inquiry just refuses to cross.
But that's the essence of his framework, isn't it? We're going to step way, way back and try to look at the whole page. So Vereiser starts with dot zero, which I think is a fascinating place to begin. It's the foundational observation that something is just fundamentally unstable about this phenomenon. He calls it the shifting masks.
Yes, the idea of radical adaptability. That's the central initial claim. Whatever this intelligence is, it doesn't present a stable identity. It is constantly shifting its costume.
Oh, like a costume.
Its costume.
Yeah.
To match human expectations and, more importantly, what we as a society currently believe is scientifically or technically possible. It's like it's wearing the mask we expect it to wear.
Which implies intent.
Deep intent. And you can see this evolution chronologically, and the shifts map perfectly to our cultural imagination.
Okay, so take us through that.
Well, back in the 1950s, right after the atomic bomb and this huge surge of pulp science fiction, the image was very simple. It was little green men arriving in classic, aluminum flying saucers.
The classic look.
The classic look. The craft were nuts and bolts. The intent was usually just observational. It perfectly matched that Cold War sci-fi era.
Then, as we got into the 1960s and 70s, our own space programs matured. So the narrative had to get more serious.
Exactly. The focus shifted away from these simple observers, and it moved toward advanced, complex, nuts and bolts hardware. Stuff capable of impressive, but theoretically understandable feats.
So you're thinking of cases like Betty and Barney Hill, or the Travis Walton case, where the physical, structural details were so heavily emphasized.
Yes. The phenomenon adapted to meet the slightly more sophisticated technological baseline of the time. It had to stay just ahead of us.
And then, crucially, by the 1980s, The mask shifted again. It moved away from just technology and squarely into our intimate psychological space with the rise of abductions.
That's the era of Whitley Strieber's communion. It's when the Greys, those large-headed, small-bodied entities, became cemented as the definitive alien image.
And the focus changed completely.
Completely. It became about genetics, trauma, psychological manipulation. It moved the phenomenon from the radar screen right into the bedroom.
And fast forward to today, 2023 through 2025, and the language has shifted again, this time entering the official lexicon of the Pentagon.
hmm Now we're hearing about transmedium craft, vehicles that defy the known capabilities of physics, that can traverse air, space, and water seamlessly.
And we have the controversial term non-human biologics, mentioned by figures like Lou Elizondo and David Grush.
So the mask is now ultra-sophisticated, physics-defying technology, tailor-made for an era of defense and intelligence scrutiny.
That adaptability it's just fascinating. If it were truly just one specific alien race from one star system with their fixed technology, why would they need to constantly update their appearance and their intent every couple of decades?
Verisar's argument is that this fluidity suggests an intelligence that is intentionally adapting its appearance, maybe to maintain relevance or, and this is more chilling, to fit our accepted paradigms of reality so we don't look past the surface.
Which leads right into dot one.
Yeah.
This one poses a massive intellectual puzzle. Why do they look just like us?
It goes against everything we expect from evolutionary biology across billions of star systems.
I found this section of the paper so compelling because Verizar himself admits his sci-fi background led him to expect infinite biological variation.
Of course. If life evolved completely separately on billions of worlds, driven by different gravity, different atmospheres, different light, you should see chaos.
Silicon-based life, beings with 3 legs, multiple compound eyes.
Or completely abstract, amorphous forms, something we couldn't even comprehend.
But the frustrating consistency in eyewitness and abductee accounts just defies that expectation. Time after time, the descriptions feature beings with the basic human template. He calls it the hominid template.
A head on top of a torso, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, 2 arms with hands and fingers, walking upright on 2 legs with feet. Even the Greys, as stylized as they are, they still adhere to this fundamental bipedal binocular structure.
It's the sheer astronomical improbability of it all, of independent evolution randomly producing the exact same design across countless separate planets.
The paper calculates the odds of this as astronomically low, essentially 0. If the universe favors efficiency, why would 2 completely separate evolutionary pathways arrive at the exact same physical structure?
Was the conclusion.
The only logical conclusion Verizar can reach inside his framework is that this design is not something that evolved independently across light years.
It's a copy.
It is something copied, perhaps from our human template because it's familiar or accessible or maybe even foundational to this planet's ecosystem.
Which hints at a deep and unsettling relationship with humanity.
Far more intimate than just a simple accidental flyby from a distant star.
So if dot 0 suggests the technology is a costume, dot 1 suggests the bodies are also a costume. Something chosen for function or familiarity, not something that evolved naturally on Planet X.
And moving into dot 2, Verizar then shifts the focus from their appearance to their behavior. He uses this really powerful analogy to analyze how the phenomenon has operated for decades, the critical difference between an explorer and a spy.
This analogy is so important because it forces us to evaluate the phenomenon using terrestrial logic, which it seems to deliberately try to defy. Historically, explorers are. Well, they're open. They're curious.
When they sail to new lands, their intention is generally discovery, contact, documentation. Their presence is known, even if it's misunderstood. They aren't defined by systematic deception.
But the UFO phenomenon, as Verizar argues, it mirrors the spy pattern perfectly.
Yes. Spies operate with concealed or, nefarious intentions. They blend in, they avoid recognition, they leave false trails, confuse their adversaries, and they destroy evidence of their true presence.
When you look at decades of UFO investigation, that is exactly the pattern you see repeated globally.
The fundamental question is, if they were truly friendly, benevolent space visitors, why the aggressive concealment?
Why the need to make definitive, repeatable proof constantly just out of reach? Why this massive multinational cover-up that has defined the topic for 70 years?
Explorers invite scrutiny. Spies evade it.
The paper concludes that solid evidence remains elusive, not because governments are incompetent, but because the intelligence itself is highly skilled at perception management.
Right. Credible sightings are often explained away with absurd explanations. The infamous weather balloons cover story is the classic, and documents disappear into top-secret vaults.
So the track covering is inherent to the phenomenon itself, not just human bureaucracy trying to hide things.
That's the argument. And he points to a very recent and I think very revealing example of this espionage pattern, Lou Elizondo.
The former head of the Pentagon's ATIP program.
The very same. In 2024, he made a staggering statement on a podcast. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Some aspects of this phenomenon are demonic in nature, connecting it to concepts of spiritual warfare."
Which is a huge statement for someone of his standing.
Massive. And then, almost immediately, within days, he walked it back, claimed he was misinterpreted, that he was speaking metaphorically, clearly under apparent pressure from the establishment or maybe something else.
And Verizor uses this retraction as key evidence.
He does. Why would a man who has spent his career fighting for truth need to retract such a profound personal observation? Unless he was operating under a system that demands concealment and track covering.
So the behavior is entirely consistent with an intelligence that is hiding its true, non-technological nature.
Exactly. And that sets the stage perfectly for Dot 3, credible witnesses speak.
Right, because the old narrative of space brothers or benign technology is now being actively challenged not by anonymous figures, but by the standing of recent military and intelligence whistleblowers.
People who are definitively not your traditional conspiracy theorists. Their credibility forms an unimpeachable set of dots.
And the weight of their testimony forces even the most skeptical mind to acknowledge that something profoundly non-conventional and non-terrestrial is operating here.
Barry Reiser highlights a few specific testimonies that really shift the entire debate.
Like David Grush, the intelligence officer. He stated publicly in 2023 that the U.S. government has non-human biologics recovered from crash sites.
And that's not a claim about lights in the sky. That is a claim about a physical, tangible presence that the government is actively concealing.
Then you have military figures providing context that goes way beyond physics or engineering. Colonel Carl Nell, a retired Army colonel who worked on these programs.
He explicitly mentioned the potential for interdimensional beings, some malevolent, in 2024. That just immediately shifts the conversation away from aerospace engineering and into metaphysics and potential threat assessment.
Right, it's a whole different conversation. And let's not forget the documentation of impossible motion. Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet from the U.S. Navy.
He testified about craft-defying known physics in 2023, referring to the infamous Tic Tac and other UAP encounters.
These are documented, physics-defying maneuvers observed by high-level naval personnel with clear radar confirmation. It's not just an eyewitness story anymore.
And finally, he includes the academic confirmation from Professor Diana Pasulka, whose research confirms that these same core phenomena, high strangeness, genetic interests, psychic effects, are being reported consistently across time and culture.
Which lends weight to the idea of a cohesive, if hidden, control system.
So when you synthesize these high-level testimonies, the simple friendly space brothers or advanced drone narrative, it just collapses completely.
These dots don't form a simple spaceship.
No. They hint at a picture that's far larger, more confusing, and potentially much more ancient, aggressive, and interdimensional than the public debate has typically allowed.
This radical shift from technology to, well, ancient and possibly malevolent intelligence takes us into the paper's core. And I have to say, what I find to be its most startling historical and spiritual claims, starting with Dot 4.
The man who connected the dots, Jacques Vallée.
Exactly. And Vallée is the crucial dot here because of his undeniable scientific credentials.
He's a renowned astronomer, a computer scientist, a venture capitalist. He is the polar opposite of a sensationalist or a theologian.
He approached the UFO problem from a purely scientific, data-driven perspective. He was trying to analyze hundreds of accounts rigorously.
And yet, after decades of investigation, Vallée, a non-religious man, reached a terrifying and completely unexpected conclusion.
A conclusion which was that the UFO phenomenon is the devil's joker in the deck of reality.
A statement of profound spiritual and existential weight coming from someone rooted in hard, quantifiable science.
I have to ask, how did Verizor's source material Vallée's own work? How did he possibly quantify spiritual manipulation? What were the data points that made him leap from advanced technology to this almost theological concept?
That's the essential question, isn't it? And Verizor explains that Vallée's leap was driven by the inconsistency of the data. He realized the entities weren't constrained by the logic of advanced science.
They weren't just advanced aliens.
No, he discovered that people were not encountering spaceships from Zeta Reticuli. They were encountering transdimensional entities whose characteristics were consistently deceitful.
How so?
They shapeshift to match cultural expectations, they manipulate human belief systems, and they show absolutely no genuine concern for human welfare. In fact, they often induce psychological trauma and physical scars.
So this is where Vallée introduces the concept of the control system.
Exactly. He argues the phenomenon isn't a series of random visitations from different planets. It's one unified intelligence that operates as a consistent control system, wearing different masks across history to maintain control over human perception and belief.
And Varazar meticulously tracks the changing masks that Vallée identified.
He does. In the medieval era, they appeared as fairies, elves, or demons, often small, demanding ritualistic compliance, and capable of whisking people away and changing them permanently.
Then in the Middle Ages, they became Marian apparitions.
Religious miracles demanding devotion, and then in the 20th century, they became flying saucers and aliens, demanding the technological faith of the space age.
It's the same mechanism of manipulation, just the cultural package changes.
Right. And John Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, he coined a term for this: ultra-terrestrials. Beings who pretend to be whatever we expect them to be, whether it's gods, angels, or aliens.
The key is deception through conformity to the local paradigm.
And the nature of this deception, as we mentioned, is often framed as predatory. The paper argues that abduction survivors consistently report being used in reproductive experiments producing human-alien hybrids.
Which isn't a benevolent biological exchange. It's exploitation.
Framed in the source material as an attempt to pollute or fundamentally alter the human genome. And that observation is the bridge from modern accounts straight back to ancient texts.
Which takes us directly into dots 5 and 6, moving from the modern control system back to these ancient warnings. Varazar argues that what we call mythology might just be consistent historical reports of the same phenomenon wearing its ancient costumes.
Specifically focusing on genetic manipulation.
Yes. So dot 5 addresses the ancient entities themselves, noting the stunning consistency across disparate ancient cultures. Across Sumerian, Greek, and biblical narratives, we find descriptions of powerful non-human gods interbreeding with human females.
And creating hybrid offspring.
The Sumerian Anunnaki are often described as having mated with humans. The Greek gods, like Zeus, were constantly taking human lovers and fathering demigods.
And crucially, the biblical sons of God producing the Nephilim.
The source material really forces the question, what if these aren't just primitive myths? What if they're consistent global reports of the same genetic manipulation that we see being reported today in modern abduction cases?
And this is where the synthesis culminates in dot 6, connecting this pattern specifically to the global flood stories. The consistency of flood narratives preserved across over 270 independent cultures. It reveals a common warning.
A warning about divine judgment on a profound corruption that touched the entire planet.
And Dreiser specifically quotes Genesis 6, verses 2 through 4, to lay the groundwork for this corruption.
Which reads, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days."
The paper then draws heavily on the interpretation found in the Book of Enoch, which provides the framework for this corruption. This interpretation identifies the sons of God as the Watchers.
A group of rebel angels who descended to earth.
Yes, and their corruption wasn't just interbreeding. They also taught prohibited knowledge to humanity, warfare, metallurgy, sorcery, even cosmetics. This intervention created a corrupted genetic line, the Nephilim.
Who are giants and entities of great violence.
And this is the critical linkage Varazar makes. The flood wasn't arbitrary. It was a divine response to the pollution of the genetic and spiritual environment by these interdimensional beings.
And when these Nephilim hybrids were destroyed by the flood, what happened to them?
The interpretation states that their disembodied spirits became the demons' restless spiritual entities seeking human bodies to inhabit or manipulate.
So this is the ultimate repetitive pattern that Varazar identifies across history.
From the Sumerian Apkallu, who are said to bring forbidden wisdom, to the medieval succubi and incubi, entities focus on sexual exploitation.
Straight through to modern alien abductions, focused on genetic harvesting and hybrid creation.
The conclusion is that it's the same control system, using different masks, but always focused on biological manipulation and hybridization to maintain a foothold in our dimension.
So if we connect all these historical dots, it suggests that the activity of 1950s flying saucers isn't some random technological arrival from a benevolent future.
No, it's merely the latest, most sophisticated expression of an ancient predatory intelligence that has been interfering with human genetics and manipulating reality since before recorded history.
That is a profoundly different interpretation of the data than what you read in most scientific journals.
This ancient spiritual interpretation of the phenomenon, it raises a critical technical contradiction that Verizor then has to tackle in dot 7.
Which is, if these entities are ancient and perhaps spiritual or interdimensional, how exactly do the craft operate in our physical reality?
Exactly. Even if they are transdimensional spirits, they manifest in our reality as physical craft that register on military radar. They leave physical evidence.
So the paper reviews the documented capabilities that absolutely defy known physics, which is why they can't be explained away as just advanced human technology.
We're talking about documented behaviors that just break Newton's laws of motion. Things like instant acceleration from 0 to hypersonic speeds. We're talking hundreds of Gs.
Which would instantly liquefy any known human pilot.
Instantly. They execute precise right-angle turns at Mach 5 or faster. Furthermore, they demonstrate negative buoyancy so they can hover motionlessly even in hurricane-force winds, and they disappear and reappear instantly.
If these were simply advanced spacecraft built by some technologically superior civilization, they should still have to obey the laws of physics as we understand them, right?
Right.
Even if they're exploiting them in exotic ways like warping spacetime.
You'd think so. But a right-angle turn at Mach 5 isn't exploiting physics. It is violating the constraints of mass, inertia, and momentum. It requires the object to momentarily exist outside of our four-dimensional constraints.
So the paper's consensus, drawn from this observed behavior, is that these are not advanced spacecraft in the conventional sense.
No, they are objects that are transdimensional. They're slipping between realities, or perhaps manipulating space-time at a truly foundational level.
So the instantaneous acceleration or disappearance isn't propulsion. It's a shift of dimensional frequency.
That's the theory. If you can momentarily exit our reality, you can avoid the constraints of mass and inertia while you make an impossible turn and then just slip back into our reality at a new point.
That distinction between propulsion and dimensional shift, that's key. It transforms discussion from engineering to metaphysics.
And this transdimensional framework provides a chilling explanation for Jot 8. Non-human biologics, explained.
Right. We know military whistleblowers like Grutch have confirmed the recovery of these non-human biologics from crash sites.
And the paper offers a stark yet chillingly logical interpretation based on the spiritual framework. If these ancient non-corporeal entities require biological vessels or suits to operate efficiently in our dimension,
Which is highly constrained by space, time, and mass.
then what exactly are these recovered bodies?
They are not the corpses of the pilot race that traveled across light years.
The interpretation is that they are discarded clothing. These grays, the classic image of the alien, may be temporary biological vessels, either grown in labs or instantaneously manifested for specific missions in our reality.
And then abandoned when damaged, or when the mission is completed, or they're just no longer needed.
This completely removes the need for complex, energy-intensive interstellar travel. It removes the need for the infrastructure to sustain a fragile, evolved body across deep space.
The entities simply manifest, or, put on a biological suit. The gray to interact with our physical dimension, perform tasks like genetic harvesting, and then discard the suit when it's done.
And this explains the consistent finding that the recovered bodies, while biological, often lack robust internal systems. It suggests they are disposable, utilitarian vessels.
That is a profound, almost terrifying shift in perspective.
Yeah.
If the grays are disposable biological vessels, the true entity operating them is something far more abstract, powerful, and persistent.
Something that doesn't need to fear death or physical capture.
And this distinction leads perfectly into dot 9, which addresses the notorious high strangeness factor.
Right. If this was just advanced technology, the evidence would be limited to engineering and physics reports. But the phenomenon goes so far beyond lights in the sky.
It consistently involved a profound reality distortion that just shatters the advanced technology explanation entirely.
Normal spacecraft simply do not rewrite reality or induce psychic trauma. The paper lists a whole litany of high strangeness elements reported consistently by witnesses.
Things that prove this is a consciousness-level interaction.
For example, you have the Oz factor. A sudden, unnatural, almost profound silence that occurs right before and during an encounter. Witnesses report the air becoming heavy, sounds just ceasing, a feeling of acute separation from reality.
It's a perceptual manipulation that isolates the witness. It makes the encounter more profound and, I imagine, much harder to share with others.
Then there is consistent time loss, where witnesses report hours just vanishing without explanation, often recovered later under hypnosis, which indicates a deep, localized manipulation of the perception of time.
Or maybe most terrifyingly, the element of screen memories.
Where the mind is implanted with a deceptive overlay. The classic example is actual trauma or abduction being remembered initially as seeing benign objects or creatures, like deer or, famously, owls.
It's a mask for the true memory of the entities and the genetic manipulation.
Furthermore, encounters often trigger physiological and psychic changes that defy materialism, poltergeist activity occurring in the witness's home after an encounter.
Or abductees developing unwanted psychic abilities, things like telepathy or precognition.
These elements suggest an interaction with an intelligence that understands and can manipulate consciousness and physical laws at a truly foundational level, far beyond what even our theoretical physics currently allows.
So if you combine transdimensional travel, disposable biological vessels, and the ability to induce psychic changes, Verieser's argument is that you are no longer talking about engineering.
You are talking about something ancient, manipulative, and spiritual that uses science fiction. The gray suit, the flying saucer, as its ultimate camouflage for an age that rejects the theological.
And this focus on fundamental deception and the spiritual nature of the control system, it brings us to dot 10, Scripture's deception warning.
Right. Verieser argues that by connecting all these dots, the phenomenon aligns precisely with universal warnings about large-scale manipulation and trickery designed to trap humanity.
He draws specifically on the biblical warning in 7 Thessalonians 2.11, which is often interpreted in a prophetic context.
God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. The implication, according to the paper, is not merely that a lie will be told, but that a massive, all-encompassing deception, a delusion, is coming.
And that humanity will be pre-programmed or primed to accept it willingly.
And this pattern isn't exclusive to one tradition, which reinforces the control system idea. Other belief systems confirm this idea of shape-shifting tricksters.
Like Islam's jinn.
Exactly. Entities known for their ability to shape-shift, to deceive, and to exist in a parallel dimension, often taking on human or animal form.
Or Native American traditions, which warn of malevolent skinwalkers and trickster spirits who imitate people and cause chaos.
The universal pattern across all these warnings is that these entities appear as angels of light or as benevolent figures.
The paper suggests that the alien savior narrative, this hope that advanced, benevolent ETs are here to save us from climate change or war or ourselves.
That is the powerful delusion. That is the lie that the phenomenon is currently setting up. It offers a technological salvation to mask a spiritual and predatory intent.
And this context allows us to approach dot 11, which is perhaps the most politically cynical yet intellectually challenging point in the entire framework.
Why full disclosure won't happen.
And why the current, highly publicized disclosure efforts might actually be part of the deception.
The core premise here is historical. Verieser argues that governments in the 1970s and 80s discovered three fundamental, terrifying things about these entities, which led to the perpetual, aggressive cover-up. It wasn't just a failure of bureaucracy.
What were the three things?
First, they defied materialism. They weren't just advanced rockets. They manipulated reality. Second, they couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. How do you fight something that can slip between dimensions?
And third.
Third, and this is crucial, they manipulate perception itself, meaning the government couldn't even trust what its own sensors or personnel were telling it.
Once a government realizes the enemy is not a foreign nation, but a non-physical intelligence that can rewrite the reality and perception of its own citizens, the entire playbook changes.
You move from defense to narrative management.
And this is where the paradox of the current disclosure lies.
Exactly. UAP hearings, AARO reports, high-profile whistleblowers. According to the paper's author, these are being used to serve the phenomenon's agenda. It is a controlled leak, managed disclosure.
So the phenomenon wants just enough information, drip-fed videos of impossible craft, claims of recovered biologics to keep humanity hoping.
Hoping and searching for benevolent ETs. They want the public to prepare for a friendly, technological arrival that will unify humanity under a false premise while concealing the true, ancient, predatory spiritual reality of what's actually happening.
So disclosure, in this framework isn't about revealing the absolute truth.
It's about managing the narrative so that when the final move is made, when the final mask of the benevolent ET is dropped, humanity is ready to accept the deception as its savior.
And the papers suggest the government is either wholly complicit in this or just so completely overwhelmed by an intelligence it cannot control that this is the only path they feel they can take to avoid planetary panic.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, from the fluid technological masks of dot 0, through the predatory ancient genetic manipulation of dot 6, and the reality warping technology of dot 9, the deception of dot 10, the final picture that emerges is exactly what Verizar promised at the start.
It is not a cute puppy.
No,
It is an ancient, deceptive, spiritual predator wearing a highly convincing science fiction mask.
and the modern high-level testimony directly reinforces this terrifying conclusion. The paper stresses the importance of that quote from Colonel Carl Nell in 2024.
Humanity is not the top of the food chain, and some of these entities have been here a very long time.
That single statement just shifts the entire context from a technological issue that we can solve with better rockets to an existential and survival issue that has been playing out for millennia.
For you, the listener, the implication of accepting this framework is huge. It changes the entire focus of the phenomena. We are no longer searching for advanced technology to reverse engineer.
We are dealing with an ancient historical and spiritual challenge that requires entirely different preparation and discernment than simple scientific investigation.
The paper concludes by addressing the specific implications for people of faith, which, again, we're just reporting neutrally as part of the source material synthesis.
The claim is that Scripture already prepared humanity for this precise deception. They quote Ephesians 6.12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
The core argument presented in the source material is that the entities masquerading as aliens today are the same principalities and powers that our ancestors encountered as demons, gods, and fairies.
The spirits of the Nephilim.
And they are essentially losing their camouflage because the sheer high strangeness of their true nature is bleeding through that technological mask.
The paper suggests a proactive, grounded response in the face of this widespread deception. Focus on not fearing, on testing every spirit or every narrative, and seeking grounded knowledge rather than speculation.
Because this predatory force thrives on confusion, fear, and the promise of salvation from an external technological source.
It truly transforms the UFO phenomenon from a military secret into a challenge of profound personal discernment.
So what does this all mean? Verizar's framework demands that you completely abandon the assumption that you are dealing with friendly, curious space travelers obeying the laws of conventional physics.
It requires you to consider that the technological advancements, the secrecy, and the psychological effects are all carefully constructed elements of a very old, intentional spiritual campaign of deception.
The power of perspective truly changes everything here. Stepping back and connecting the dots across time and discipline allows you to see the monstrous history behind the modern science fiction mask.
And we'll leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn directly from the source material's conclusion.
If the Greys are merely discarded biological suits, temporary vessels grown for missions in our reality, what does that say about the true nature and identity of the entities piloting them?
Entities who exist outside the need for corporeal form, outside the constraints of our physics, and yet are consistently involved in the manipulation of our genetics.
What happens when they decide they no longer need the suits? And what is the ultimate non-technological goal of an intelligence that has been interfering with our reality since the era of the Nephilim?
That is something for you to mull over as you process this startling, unifying shift in perspective offered by Verizar's comprehensive framework.
Until the next deep dive, keep questioning the picture the dots reveal.